and welcome back to Build Propulsion Lab at Devoxx UK, coming to you live from London. And my next guest is Claire. Welcome.
Hello.
And thank you for being here. And you mentioned that your talk was about continuous integration and test-driven development. So this is obviously very close to our heart as we are Build Propulsion Lab, which is all about that. So what are the interesting topics that you discussed?
Well, I suppose probably the biggest thing is that my talk is slightly controversial. So the title of the talk is Continuous Integration. That's not what they meant. And what I'm talking about is going back to the original principles as laid out by Ken Beck when he originally defined the concept of continuous integration. And the main thrust of what I'm talking about is how people nowadays quite often talk about continuous integration and say that they're practicing continuous integration, where in fact they're working in branches. If you go back to Kent Beck's original definition of continuous integration, what he was talking about was what people now tend to call trunk-based development. And so I use that term in order to distinguish it from what people commonly do now, which is to use branches and then call it continuous integration.
Well, that makes tons of sense because when you work on a branch, you are not integrating. So there is no integration in continuous integration.
Yes.
Right? The continuous integration idea is that you check that your code can integrate with other people's code, and you cannot do it if you're working on a branch and not merge it or rebase it frequently enough. But if I work in branch, but I have the discipline of constantly rebasing my branch, then I actually do have continuous integration.
Only if everybody's doing it. Only if all the people in all the branches are constant. Even then, no, because they're not merging their code back into the main branch.
So I check that my code works well with what was the branch when other people branched out of it and starting to do their work.
Yes.
But as long as I don't rebase with all the possible branches out there, I'm not integrating with all of them.
Exactly. Yes. At some point, somebody's going to merge their branch back into main. You're going to do a merge, and suddenly you're having to merge with everything they've done over the length of their branch, the lifetime of their branch.
And no rebase could fix it because I rebase with trunk and not with their branch.
Exactly.
Okay, but the branch-based development exists for a reason, right? It's not because everybody just decided to do their own thing. So there are advantages for the branches or disadvantages for trunk-based development, if you call it. What do you think about those? How can we overcome them, if at all?
I mean, people do use branches. Most people do use branches, and the reasons that they give you for using them are many. But I think that one of the most common reasons is that people just think, I just want to do my thing, and I don't want to have to worry about other things. I don't want to have to worry about what's happening in the rest of the code base when I'm in the midst of pulling it apart and breaking everything. You know, I'm adding new code, I'm changing code. What I do has not been properly tested yet, and it might break things, and I'm worried about that. And I'm also worried that whatever that person over there is doing is going to break what I'm doing, and I just want to have to not think about that. I just want to focus on what I'm doing. Now, that is a normal impulse. We've all had
legit, right?
I've had that impulse.
Yeah.
What I would like to suggest is it's not something we should encourage. It's a perfectly natural impulse that we can all understand, but it leads to problems because it leads to the false idea that what you're doing lives in isolation. It doesn't. It is going to have to go back into that main code base. And the longer you postpone that, the more likely it is that there will be pain when you try to merge back in again. And not just the pain of merge hell, but also the pain of these things really don't actually work together, and we've only just discovered that. And the longer it takes you to find out that something doesn't work, the more likely it is that the problem will be big. and it will therefore take longer to fix. The more frequently you merge, the more frequently you find out about the problems, the smaller those problems will be. The thing about trunk-based development is it is a practice, it is a skill. It's not something you can just do. You can't just suddenly decide, oh, you know what, I've heard about this trunk-based development thing. I saw Claire talking about it. We're all going to do that now. And in fact, one of the main thrusts of my talk is you can't just do it. There are a whole bunch of practices. There are new skills that you have to learn. You have to work in a very different way. But one of the things you have to learn how to do is to move in tiny steps, where at the end of each step, the code compiles and runs and the tests pass. People quite often get in a habit of the analogy that I draw is you take the car engine apart and all the pieces are lying on the floor.
That's exactly the picture I had in mind, taking the whole engine apart.
Yes.
But sometimes you have to take the whole engine apart.
No, you don't. No, but it's a skill. You don't have to. It is nearly always possible to move in tiny steps where you just change a small thing and at the end of the small change it's working again. But it's a skill. And it's a skill that a lot of people haven't learned, but it's a skill worth learning because it reduces risk, because it allows you to move quickly, it allows you to be more agile. If you imagine the person running from the sniper, they need to be able to zigzag and take evasive action. The larger the chunk of time between each step of what you do, the harder it is to move quickly and be flexible and be able to take evasive action if necessary. It is nearly always possible to break everything down into tiny chunks. People just aren't in the habit of doing it.
I wonder if it depends on the quality of the code base, on the design, for example, architectural decisions. And sometimes the developer is not in charge of such decisions. So they might inherit especially messy legacy code that they cannot really do anything without taking the engine apart.
Yes, there are lots of blockers in the way of working in this way. And one of the blockers is a code base that's really not fit for that purpose. So this is why you can't just say we're all going to do trunk-based development. You might be on a journey towards it. And part of that journey will be to refactor your code base to make it possible to make small changes. Because there may well be, as you say, real problems in your code base that means it's not possible to work in small steps. But what you can do is change it in small steps. So refactoring is something that can nearly always be done in tiny steps. You can gradually make something better. So you can learn the principles of moving in small steps in the process of moving towards a state where everybody can take even more smaller steps. That journey itself can also be done in small steps, and you can be learning those skills as you go. And not really, that is the fundamental building block of all improvements in software delivery, I think, is learning how to take small steps.
This is fascinating. This is very cool. And you also mentioned TDD, test-driven development. Is it like an adjacent topic? Is it related?
It's very related, yes, because I don't think you can do trunk-based development without. I'm not going to say you can't do trunk-based development without doing test-driven development. I'm saying I wouldn't do trunk-based development without doing test-driven development. At the very least, your tests need to be very close to your code. Ideally, I would say you're going to be in a better state if you write the tests first. The closer the tests are to the code, as in time, that they're written as close as possible to the code being written. And I think, you may as well just write them first because you're going to be in a much better state if you do that.
Because this is what gives everybody the confidence that they can continuously integrate.
Exactly.
And it lowers this urge to take your work to your own corner because everybody is going to break everything.
Yeah.
Because if you have TDD, you know for a fact that it's not going to happen and the integration will be painless, and then you have less urge to do that.
Yeah. So what you can do, and this will blow a lot of people's minds, but there are people who are doing it, you can do it, it's highly effective, is you write one very small test that tests one very small area of your code, you write the code that makes the test pass, and then you integrate. then you merge with the main branch of the code, and then it gets pushed. Now that's continuous deployment, which is a different thing, and the topic of my talk is just continuous integration. But for me, one of the main points of continuous integration is that it allows you to do continuous deployment.
Of course, the whole idea of continuous deployment is you have enough confidence to take what you just wrote and put it in production without manual steps and manual releases.
But that does depend on context. So for instance, if you're doing mobile app development, you're not going to be doing continuous deployment. That's extremely unlikely because you don't want your app users to be getting updates every few minutes.
Yes.
So, you know, and there are other contexts as well where continuous deployment in its pure sense is problematic. But you still want to get as close to that as you can. And if you're doing test-driven development, you can write a test, make it pass, merge the code.
And then you have the confidence
and it's deployable. And you know, because you've only changed
needed.
a tiny thing and the tests are passing. And if it turns out to have broken something, it won't have broken very much because it was such a small change. So yeah, it might be going all the way to production, and then somebody might get a small problem, which will be easy to detect and easy to fix, rather than hoarding those changes.
Especially if you use a controlled, canary deployments and controlled rollout.
Bugs can still slip through this. I mean, this is not foolproof. There might be an edge case that you didn't consider, that you didn't write a test for, that doesn't get discovered until a user discovers it.
Yep.
But it will be small. And then you'll write a test that captures that bug, and you'll make the test pass. And then the next time, that test will be there, safeguarding against any future problems.
Fascinating, makes perfect sense, makes us all better developers. Claire, thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.
It was great. And you'll see you next interview in Propulsion Lab, Devoxx UK, right after this. Thank you.
Cool.